I love the shirt,
There we go.
repping the skin already.
Mate, you've got to, don't you? Nobody else is gonna promote your brand for you. Nobody wakes up and thinks, how can I help out the other companies today? So it's about promoting what you're working on and everything else. So, and I guess, start off, I really appreciate the platform that you're building and helping companies do that. It's
Well,
been mega to watch your
I guess
hustle on that.
one of us wakes up and thinks about everyone else if everyone else doesn't.
Exactly. Yeah, no. It's been I've been following along on X and yeah, it's cool to see kind of a diverse range of opinions and ideas and it's also nice to see investors thinking outside the box of just kind of, software and SaaS and ARR. I think that's been a recurring theme of today's show. So good to hear for someone like me.
I completely agree. I think that the fact that we're back in the cycle of engineering and we're getting into the flavor of like deep tech and hard tech is I'm incredibly excited about. Obviously, right, what you do and your colored history just brings joy to my life right now. The fact that I get to speak to you, and the fact we get to talk about skin. Can we give some context on like background of Lyall and how skin came into being?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm a Kiwi. I grew up in New Zealand. I ended up going to college in the US in California. Very fortunate to have done that. And straight out of school, had a startup in kind of marketing tech actually, with a friend of mine from the motorsport space. Um, this was in kind of a world where Exact Target had just been bought by Salesforce. There was a lot happening in the Indianapolis area, and we were kind of part of that cohort. Um, Unfortunately, we didn't get that, far enough off the ground to support, a young Kiwi on a green card. So ended up coming to London and joined Claret Capital. We were then known as Harbit, which is a large US family office and kind of fun platform, and spent 10 years there really learning the ropes. Did a lot of reps there is kind of how I describe it. A large number of businesses, largely in the growth space. And so in my time there as a fund, we invested in about 150 businesses and kind of I was responsible in some part for about 50 of them. Um, but as I say, kind of later stage, Series B, C, we were providing venture debt facilities. That team continued to, do amazing things and I stay very close to them. But about a year ago, there's my family office had been run by my grandfather while he was still around. And we got to the point where, naturally it kind of made sense for me to try and step in and provide a bit of a different point of view there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Through that, had a lot of exposure to motorsport. I spent my summers in college, working in Indianapolis and Pit Lane.
Gotta ask,
Sweeping a lot of.
what was that like?
I
Every
was
kid's
mega. It
dream.
was mega. Yeah, a lot of my good friends were getting really interesting internships at investment banks and funds and everything else. And so I think at the time you don't appreciate just how lucky you are, but made the most of it. Saw some parts of the US that most people don't get the opportunity to see. Every morning you wake up, especially in a team where your grandfather's name is on the building and you have to represent the family well. But yeah, no, there's we could fill up the whole half hour with kind of anecdotes from there and some of the tricks that the mechanics like to play on the young fellas
Give me
and
a
everything
flavor.
else. But
Give me a flavor. It's obviously not the purpose of this particular segment, but I need some.
oh
Give me some.
so I was fairly switched on to hearing kind of some of the usual tricks that they'd played. You'd get sent to different race shops asking for 5 pounds of crossweight, which of course isn't a physical thing. And so, or a long weight and a short weight. So I was fairly switched on to it. Um, but at the time, the league was doing quite a bit of drug testing. And so we were at Texas Motor Speedway. and it was my last race of the season, and so somebody came along wearing a very official looking IndyCar shirt,
Hmm.
and informed me that I'd been randomly selected for a drug test. And that I had to pee in a cup and then walk outside of the track, which is Texas Motor Speedway, is a big super speedway, and drop it at the medical tent. And I had to be there within 30 minutes, or the test was invalid. So here I was running around the IndyCar paddock with a cup of my own pee, as the whole paddock laughed at me. And it was one of those things where you have a suspicion that they might be pulling your leg, but equally, I didn't want to be that guy that refused to do a drug test. So yeah, no, that was entertaining. All sorts of other ones. I mean, TV crews would show up and ask the intern about the setup of the car and all sorts of things just to mess with people. So it was an education. I loved every moment of it. And I definitely got the bug for motorsport then. And every time I step foot on a track, it feels like coming home a little bit. I think, a lot of people probably have a misconception of US motorsport.
It's not just going round in
Especially on some of the,
circles.
yeah, it's not go fast, turn left. And I think, there's a visceral, kind of reaction that your body has when you're at the track, especially when you've kind of woken up to the smell of ethanol in the morning. So, I love it, and every opportunity I can to be back on track, I make the most of it.
I get to do Spa Porsche Day around February, March time. And for me, it's like, if
Mega.
I can just get the show to just fuel that, I'm going racing every single day of the
There you
week.
go.
Once
There
you
you
get the
go. No,
bug,
it's
you never
certainly
lose it.
addiction. No, and my grandfather was exactly the same. He was a Silicon Valley guy, that was very successful in his own right, and after that, he spent kind of the last 20 years of his life really um, focusing on motorsport and
Hmm.
adjacent industries, and so I think I kind of got the bug from him. We were extremely close, and so
Got to ask,
um,
what did Granddad see about the space that you sort of took from him and applied today?
I think one, he was extremely competitive.
Hmm.
And it's kind of the purest form of that to some extent. Um, Two, I think he was very much a technologist, and so from that standpoint, motorsport traditionally has always been the leading edge of so much innovation. So I think he saw it as an opportunity to maintain kind of a foot in the leading edge of so much of what is getting developed in the physical world. And there's also a huge amount of pride there. I think it's interesting. He would always say we won the Indianapolis 500 in 2013, and after that, he felt like he'd really kind of achieved what he needed to there. And so he would play his cards pretty close to his chest, but he was immensely proud of that, and as am I. It was a surreal day and experience, and something that's kind of stuck with me and my family for a very long time, and I think it always will.
Do you get etched into
So even my
history
boys
winning
now,
that race?
yeah, you absolutely do. I mean, the drivers' faces on the side of the trophy for forever, right? It's been running for over 100 years. It's the biggest single day sporting event in the world.
Hmm.
350,000 people, and there's it traditionally has been run at the same time as Monaco, and it's very much kind of our equivalent of that. It's a brutal race. It's long. It's unlike anything really, and they say that the speedway kind of picks its winners, and we were just lucky on that day that it was us, and obviously Tony, who was our driver, Tony Kanaan, did a fantastic job. It's required watching once a month here, and in the Davenport household, we have to go back and watch that. Um, and before the final restart, he said, "Look, I'm going for it." You hear him say it over the radio, and he does, and he shoots a shot, and the rest is history. So, yeah, no, it's part of the DNA now,
And I guess you're shooting
and
your shot with skin now, stepping out of the family office and like going for it.
Yeah, look, we were shareholders in Cosworth, which is a pillar of British motorsport
Hmm.
technology,
And
and
they developed
we got to.
they helped develop the 4GT engine that won them on.
Yep, yeah, no, I mean
So like racing pedigree
there's
lives through and through you.
yeah, I mean, it kind of walking the halls there is like walking through like a history of motorsport greatness, really. And we were extremely proud to be part of that, and for my very small role, very proud to be part of that. And we got to a point earlier this year where we divested out of that. And I really wanted to stay in the space. Like all good investors, I think there's a natural curiosity that comes with working around so many innovative people. So and I'm sure you've got the same. There's notebooks of ideas and business models and things that you want to do. And after we sold out of that, I had a little bit of time to kind of sit back and reflect on what made sense. And especially as we see uh, kind of the market converging on, obviously there is a huge amount of AI startups at the moment that are doing incredibly well from a valuation standpoint and everything else. Um, but I really looked at it as an opportunity to create proprietary data around aerodynamics, which is an area that's very much still based on kind of simulation and brute force, and think about a way that we can develop our own data, and then use that data to really help people optimize vehicles. So motorsport is naturally a starting point for us. It's not going to be our only vertical going forward, but it makes a huge amount of sense, especially given my background and my network in the space, but also kind of the need. There's always a need for performance in motorsport, and it's tenths of seconds, it's hundreds of seconds that separate the winners and the losers. So that's where we're really focusing at the moment.
When I think skin, it almost feels as if you are pulling the data off the car, almost like a first principles rethinking of aerodynamics. Like, am I getting that right in the way that I think about what we're doing over there?
Precisely. Yeah, no, precisely. So we're embedding ourselves right on the surface of the vehicle. With the technology that's available at the moment, we're able to capture huge amount of structured, rich data that allows us in real time to kind of build our own real world wind tunnel data. So,
So is
you
it
know,
supposed to sit
we're
adjacent to a wind tunnel or almost take away the wind tunnel itself?
no, I don't think. I think there'll always be a space for wind tunnels.
Hmm.
Obviously, they're a huge capex investment for the people that do make them. But the way I see Skin is it's really leveraging the final 5 to 10% of performance over kind of the big development of a vehicle, right? So whether that's an aircraft and you're looking at different design principles around wings and everything else, that's going to be done in a wind tunnel because you can't go out there and just fly an experimental aircraft and hope that it works.
Hmm.
So there has to be theory developed around that and prototypes built there. Where we really make sense is in the real world as you're trying to refine things. So from a development standpoint, that might be A/B testing different components. But to go back to the motorsport example, it's really about these are the environments that we walk into. You can simulate a lot of different variables in a CFD or in a wind tunnel. But it's kind of that old, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And you get onto the track and something's different or something's reacting in a different way. The tires aren't quite what you imagined, or they're harder or softer or whatever else. And so from that perspective, it's really about, okay, this is the environment that we're in and how do we set up the vehicle for optimal performance, and doing that in a way that's really rich and data driven, and eventually where we'll get to is we'll be adding machine learning and AI layers on top of that to really optimize the vehicle and do some of that. But for starters, it's generating a really rich proprietary data pool that we can allow engineers to leverage to maximize the output of their vehicles.
Do you think over time skin is going to quite literally embed itself into monocoques as an example? So when we think of racing today, a lot of Europe thinks of F1. It's just because it's what we're used to. We think of Le
Mhm.
Mans. Do you think that over time you'll be able to develop skin so that it will quite literally sit on the car always?
Um,
Or will it
I mean,
always
from
be used for a
can
testing perspective?
candidly, there's different applications, whether it's setting up a vehicle and testing or practice to optimize for the setup of the vehicle. But then there's also, in race scenarios, I would think of kind of structural monitoring
Hmm.
and degradation over a race. So there's typically fairly limited improvements you can do to a vehicle in a race scenario. You can make some adjustments. But those are largely based on, in Formula One, for example, the vehicle is getting lighter, therefore it's reacting differently. But, in an example where somebody's driven over someone's front wing, and, we're not sure whether to bring them in and spend 30 seconds changing the front wing.
Hmm.
We could potentially there be in a position to, provide data where, hey, look, we're 30% down on the front left, and that's important or is not important at this track, and therefore we kind of make the gamble. I think that's kind of further in the future in terms of fundamental embeddedness. You know, I think that it's certainly a route we could explore in the future. I think we're very much a kind of a flexible solution to some extent. So the advantage we have is we can be placed anywhere on the vehicle, and so depending on what you're developing or what the conditions require at a certain event, for example, some events are more high downforce than others, and you may be focused on different parts of the vehicle. It allows that kind of modularity. So, there may be more sensors on one aspect of the vehicle versus another, based on kind of the requirements in the field at the time.
But it gives the
So
teams the ability to build their own relevant data sets compared to using like the glow paint that we see in F1 today, or potentially another racing series where if a photo's
yeah,
taken of it, you could sort of figure out what's going on that car.
yeah, absolutely. And we're targeting being in the region of about 30 to 40 million data points an hour coming off a vehicle. So
Jesus.
from that perspective, it's going to be a super high fidelity picture of the aerodynamic forces on a vehicle. And so, when you think about that across, multiple races, different scenarios, we're going to have a huge data lake that makes sense there to the engineers to be able to really leverage. So those the tools that have existed in the market have obviously been effective to get to the point where we are today. I think what we're aiming to achieve is taking a first principle look at this and thinking, how do we leverage what exists in the physical world, and then use that to hopefully make the models that we use fundamentally smarter.
What does this end up looking like physically? Is skin like a? I'm thinking of the Ford versus Ferrari film where you see the cotton wool sort of like lapping in the wind. Does skin look like that, or is it something a little bit more sophisticated today?
It's a little bit more sophisticated than that. My lawyers will be screaming at me in the background not to give too much away, but effectively, we'll be embedded into, the tape that goes on the outside of the vehicle. So from that perspective, it's an ultra thin, piece of tape that would sit on top of there and effectively collect data. We're leveraging existing form factors. One of the challenges in motorsport is that the moment you get to the track, there is very limited time for the teams and the engineers and the mechanics. So we really focus on creating kind of that Apple experience. So we're spending a lot of time in the design thinking about how do we make this so that it's as frictionless as possible for the teams to be able to apply this. So we're really working on reducing whatever friction there is there. I mean, the objective would be that someone as simple-minded as myself could apply it as a 23-year-old stumbling around kind of the IndyCar paddock. So that's what we're targeting and how we're thinking about it. And we're really excited to see some really positive feedback from the teams because we come from a standpoint of understanding what it's like to be on the ground there. So really thinking about how to make it. The folks at launch talk about delighting your customers, and that's really a focus of mine at the moment, and trying to make it as valuable as possible in the most streamlined way. So leveraging those existing technologies there.
What's hard for you right now? What's hard for Skin and Lyall?
So my KPI for the next 6 months as we develop out the product to kind of a production scale. We've got the MVP. It's been very successful, and we've been able to create quite a lot of interest from that standpoint. The challenge is candidly, generating as many data points as possible. So my KPI is hours on vehicle and data points collected. We've been fortunate to engage with some really motivated and generous testing partners, both in motorsport and outside of that. So I guess the easy answer is fundraising, right? We've kind of started here in the last 2 weeks, and it's really just being able to deliver units, testing units which we can quickly iterate, and that's kind of the beauty of motorsport. There is a lot of testing time. There is great feedback loops. So from that perspective, I don't want to shoot myself in the foot, but we haven't struggled to find people that want to test it. It's just being able to make sure that we're iterating quickly. Like so many kind of hardware / software founders. The old adage is hardware is hard, right? And so you need to be able to be flexible to iterate quickly. I've got a really good team behind me from that perspective. But at the end of the day, it's about being able to show up and delight people with product that works the first time. So we're very early in our fundraising journey. It's a very different world when you're sitting on this side of the table, especially at this stage, versus when I was kind of doing it as a growth investor. But I'm loving it, and I find that the conversations that you have with funding partners at this stage are really interesting. People once they identify the issue are excited, and so it's just about kind of leveraging that and making sure you're delivering the right story from that side.
I've got to ask before I let you go. You've obviously been investing side and deploying capital into the world, and now you're in founder mode on the other side. For you, when you're looking at the space you're operating in, when you think of founders that you want to channel throughout this process, that you look to and think, yeah, they did it. I like the way that they built their relevant products. Who do you look at?
Oh, brutal. I mean, the easiest one, I guess, would be like the Elon Musks of the world, right? I mean, like somebody's cliched bingo card just went off there. But what I like about the way he's built his businesses is he sets a very clear guiding principle early, so everybody in the business understands where they want to get to. SpaceX wants to help humans live on Mars. Tesla wants to make electric cars the dominant form factor in the automotive market. And so I really like the way that he can set an ambitious goal and run at it from that perspective. And so I've tried to mimic that to some extent. With I want everybody that works at the company, whether it's a intern or one of our investors and board members, to understand that we are building real world wind tunnel data, because being able to then it might not be that conversation, but it might be the next conversation. Somebody turns around and says, I love motorsport. Oh, that's interesting. I work with a team that does real world wind tunnel data. You create your own brand ambassadors from that standpoint when there's a very clear message. And I think that candidly, that's something, to go back to your conversation earlier with Jeff, I think it might be one of the differences between US and European companies. US companies tend to be, quite crisp at that, and perhaps better at kind of the I won't call it self promotion, but like the sales side
They are.
of
They
the
are.
business
We got to get a little bit
there.
better ourselves. That's why we do the show.
Yeah, and then I guess on a very different point, there's a team in London called Territory Group that do something completely different. But the founder there, Nick, is a mega guy. I really like the way he thinks about the world. He's a founder that I've stayed in touch with, even though I haven't been part of the team, and I think he comes at things from a completely different way of thinking about it. But being able to have kind of a very human conversation with other founders is rare, and extremely valuable. So, I think that, there is an element of kind of radical candor, self-awareness that, sometimes gets lost in the wash when we're trying to sell ourselves, because that's fundamentally what we're trying to do. But, every now and then you sit down with somebody and you just have a very real conversation, and that goes a long, long way. I don't know. Well, he's obviously a very successful founder in his own right, but I don't know if it always translates into the best business people. But in a world where our conversations are so fast paced, your calendar will be back to back to back for days on end. Sometimes just kind of reaching through that veil a little bit and having those conversations is mega. And so I hope I'll be able to add to that, Paul. And I always enjoy those conversations with people that are kind of fighting for what they want to do.
All right, last three questions. One, do you take investors to the track?
Yeah, absolutely.
Love
Yeah.
it. Do you have a favorite?
I'm just waiting for your check, mate.
Well, if I could raise the capital, you have my bet. Secondly,
There you
the pictures on the wall behind you, they're obviously, it feels like an Indy car, but it also kind of looks like these early 80s F1 cars. Which one is it?
Yeah, no. So I'm a real Senna fanboy. So I think it's he's another guy that just had that kind of human connection.
Went for every gap.
And yeah, so love that. And then this here is actually, and I'm glad you can't zoom in on it because there's a very hungover Lyall there. That was the day after the Indy 500 in 2013. So pretty special moment for us as a family. So that's me and my grandparents and my auntie and my two very young cousins at that age. So yeah, it was mega, and Tony, of course. So that was a surreal moment for me there.
All right, last one. If you could have any car that you put that granddad helped put a Cosworth engine in, which one would it be?
Oh man.
Or even if it's Cosworth derived.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm a sucker for any kind of old school John Player special or something like that. I
Nice.
appreciate I can't drive that on the road. But I've been fortunate to spend a bit of time with Emerson Fittipaldi over the years. And even the way he still talks about, that generation of vehicles, it's hard not to come away kind of inspired there. So yeah, I'm a sucker for the classics. It might not be the prettiest car in the world, but some of those old Ford Sierras are pretty cool as well. But yeah, it has to be something like a John Player special or something for me.
Lyall, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for the time. You're building something incredible. I'm here to help you amplify the message along the way. Can't wait to do this again. We've got to do it for the track next time.
Mega. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We'll do it from Indy.
Sounds great. Speak to you soon. Ciao.